Assalamu alaikum. So carrying on from the reconstruction, page 12 in the middle. In the previous lines, Iqbal was using some quite astounding language, really, talking about a conquest of nature as an actual fact. There is no doubt that the treatment of religious experience as a source of divine knowledge is historically prior to the treatment of other regions of human experience for the same purpose. The original and the oldest way of knowing God has always been to base this knowledge, this path, upon the religious experience. The Quran, recognizing that the empirical attitude is an indispensable stage in the spiritual life of humanity, attaches equal importance to all the regions of human experience as yielding knowledge of the ultimate reality, which reveals its symbols both within and without. The Quran recognizes that every aspect of human experience is potentially meaningful. These are all ways of knowing God, the ultimate reality. God reveals his symbols, his ayat, both within us and outside of us. So in the notes of this book here is linked to Surah Al-Fusilat 53. We shall show them our signs in the heavens and in themselves, till it is clear to them that it is the truth. And also Surah Al-Dariyat 20-21. In the earth are signs for those having sure faith, and in yourself will you not see? So historically, before the Quran, just to say, I know Iqbal's language can often be a little like dawah, and that's because later da'is, kind of simplified a lot of the messages and made them into slogans. And we shouldn't dismiss what's actually beneath the rhetoric, because there's a genuinely profound insight that Iqbal is making here, that the Quran recognizes an empirical attitude as an essential stage in humanity's spiritual development. Taken seriously, this isn't any slogan about Islam's compatibility with science or with the modern world. It's a statement about consciousness itself, about the human capacity to discover the divine through engagement with the actual world. So I can explain why I've actually called this series The Restoration of the Reconstruction. It's to clear away these accumulations of connotations that are actually obscuring the seriousness of what this book is actually saying. So Iqbal carries on. One indirect way of establishing connections with the reality that confronts us is in reflective observation and control of the symbols as they reveal themselves to sense perception. The other way is direct association with that reality as it reveals itself within. Even though that he acknowledged self-based knowledge as being indirect, he interprets the human mastery of nature as an actual spiritual act, the mind's participation in God's creative will. In this light, the conquest of nature is not for secular power, but a mode of worship, an appropriation of the real by the spiritual, as he said before. He carries on to write, the naturalism of the Quran is only a recognition of the fact that man is related to nature, and in this relation, in view of a possibility as a means of controlling her forces, must be exploited not in the interest of desire for domination, but in the nobler interest of a free upward movement of spiritual life. So when Iqbal says the naturalism of the Quran, he doesn't mean materialism. He sees the Quran as insisting that we engage with the natural world. For nature is real, it's lawful, intelligible, and open to human inquiry. The Quran does not advocate an ascetic flight into some supernatural realm. Instead, it grounds the spiritual within the natural. As Iqbal writes, man is related to nature. There is no escape from nature to the transcendent ideal world. Rather, the movement is reversed. Man brings the ideal into the reality of nature, transforming it through conscious participation and creative action. So he gives legitimacy to science and technology here, but he insists that they must be pursued for a greater purpose, spiritual ascent, not mere power or pleasure. Control is justified as stewardship, khilafah, not domination. But when he says the Quran is naturalistic, does he mean it is scientific? I would say no, because when we hear the word scientific, we assume it means something exclusively positivist, dealing only with what can be measured or predicted. What Iqbal is saying is something quite different. He is saying that the universe itself is a sign, an ayah of God. Just a few pages earlier, we read, His signs are the creation of the heaven and of the earth, and your variety of tongues and colours. Herein truly are signs for all men. Surah 30, verse 22. And about this and other similar ayat, Iqbal says, no doubt the immediate purpose of the Quran in this reflective observation of nature is to awaken in man the consciousness of that of which nature is regarded as symbol. So, when Iqbal speaks of nature, he is not speaking of a cold mechanism, but of a living revelation to observe, to reflect, to experiment. All of this becomes a form of worship if it awakens the heart to what the world is a symbol of. The Quran's naturalism, then, is not a theory of physics. It's a theology of attention. It sanctifies the act of knowing and the possibility of restoring the harmony between science and self. And then at the end, he writes, in the interests of securing a complete vision of reality, therefore, sense perception must be supplemented by the perception of what the Quran describes as fu'ad or qalb, the heart. And we'll talk about that next time. So this is an optimistic vision of science, and we have to remember that he wrote this in the late 20s and delivered it in the early 30s. And the attitude towards science itself was very different at that time. Hiroshima hadn't happened. The Second World War, the scientific systematic annihilation of millions of Jews hadn't happened. There was no threat of nuclear destruction. There was no threat to the very fabric of ecology through different chemicals and pesticides. From the other side of the Second World War, Iqbal's optimism seems somewhat naive. The pessimism that ensued about man's ability to actually control the unleashed power that science had brought was unknown at the time that Iqbal was delivering these lectures. We have to read this book in the context of his time, but see actually that maybe that faith can be restored once again. So that's why I have called this the restoration of the reconstruction. Anyway, I'll carry on next time. If you have listened this far, please do like the video and subscribe.